Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another lesson of class and the last lesson in art. Now, this is lesson 29, resources, tools, and supplies. So let's get into it. What's the difference, right? Well, this is not that, meaning, well, resources are not tools, and tools not really are supplies or resources. You know what I'm saying? And then, of course, you have, well, the understanding of each one. Resources. Well, what is a resource? Well, what are tools? What are supplies? Tools would be used as instruments to, let's say, work on a car or to play tennis or to play baseball or whatever the case may be. Supplies. Well, if you lose a ball, you're going to have to get another one. Those are your supplies. Then resources, the energy that is used in order to conduct the game. So this brings meaning to certain things. But let's go a little bit further, shall we? Resources are used like minerals are used in the body. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, just like you put gas in a car or fuel in your lawnmower, whatever the case may be, that is a resource, but is a finite resource. Similar to, well, let's say money or currency or cash or gold or silver, right? These are, yes, assets, but they're also resources, right? You've heard of the political thing going on right now. They just struck a deal for resources and minerals, so on and so forth. But why would we need those? Well, we need those to keep going, to provide energy. Now, tools help you get the task done. Well, how are we going to get those resources over here, right? How do we move the resources in the supply chain within logistics? How do we do that without, being caught off guard, without being, taken by pirates or whatever the case may be? So this is the planning that has to go into everything, dealing with the logistics, dealing with movement, dealing with shipping, dealing with air travel, whatever the case may be. And then supplies help you continue, right? So let's say you're playing a game, right? Let's say you're racing, right? However, your fuel mileage sucks. So you carry extra fuel to continue going. If you're hiking, right, you're going to eventually get hungry because you're burning resources in the body. So you need supplies to help you keep going. So you pull out a Cliff Bar or whatever the case may be. If you're playing tennis, you need more balls, so on and so forth, because sometimes you want the game to keep going without having to always chase the ball around the court. So you'll normally see a tennis player keep an extra ball in his pocket, whatever the case may be. Now, let's talk about how science teaches us that it is smart to conserve energy. Now, science didn't have to really teach us that. It just had to acknowledge what the body already does, right? Because the body is designed to conserve energy. So when you go to the gym, if you remember my references, several of them about the gym, you know, at about, let's say, 40 to 50% of output of your energy, so on and so forth, of you lifting weights, running, whatever the case may be, you actually get to, chill out for a little bit and your brain says, okay, we did enough, so on and so forth. Or let's say you're hiking, right? And people say, oh, well, I'm tired. Or let's say you're running, right? I had an experience with my little sister when I was in the process of joining the Marines, and we did a simple IST. So it was like a 1.5 mile run, so on and so forth. And we're all running, and then all of a sudden I see her getting further and further away from everybody. So I slowed down. I'm like, hey, are you okay? So on and so forth. She goes, you guys keep going, I'll catch up. I was like, that's not how this works around here. So I'm going to run with you, and I'm going to stay with you so that we finish this completely together, all right? So we did. Now, was she exhausted afterwards? Yes. And then she quickly acknowledged the fact that the Marines was not for her, because when we told her that she had to run 3 miles, and this was just to see exactly where you were at, well, she kind of got her eyes opened a little bit, right? And then, of course, there was all the other physical stuff on top of the education and training that goes into it, so on and so forth. Now, not to knock on my sister, she's extremely smart and intelligent, has a beautiful family. Her husband's was in the Air Force, so on and so forth. Cleaned water, as they say. I actually gave a speech about cleaning water to this girl named Vivian while I was at a restaurant. Thought it was pretty funny. Anyways, so It's a long story, but what is water? Water is needed as a supply to refuel your body for hydration purposes, so on and so forth, because over time, just like anything else, whether you're in cold weather or hot weather, or you're just moving around a lot, you're going to need to rehydrate. And so because those resources aren't there, you carry around extra bottle of water, right? So let's move forward, right? Because let's think about it. The body doesn't want you to exacerbate too much energy. However, if you don't, then you will not train it. Things like the mitochondrion, which trains the ATP, so on and so forth, etc. So if you train the mitochondrion, then it will increase ATP, which will eventually increase energy output. Simple physics. If you study science, you can get into it. Now, science also teaches that resources are needed in the body. Why are resources needed in the body? Well, similar to like a bear that hibernates in the winter, right? They consume a lot of, let's say, fish, honey, whatever the case may be if you watch Winnie the Pooh, but they consume a lot. They store up fat, blubber, whatever the case may be, and they gain a lot of weight. Why? Because they enter into a hibernation period, i.e., fasting period, and they have to be self reliant during that sleeping period that they're in. So when bears hibernate, so on and so forth, they rely on the internal resources that have been gathered, right? Whereas other animals, lions, ox, so on and so forth, don't necessarily have this pattern, but if you notice lions, they will rest a lot, right? Similar to a cheetah. A cheetah will rest a lot, but it has maximum output, but it's normally for short bursts. Same thing with, well, lions and lionesses, right? They have maximum output, but for short bursts, and then they rest for a long period of time or a decent amount of time. Why is this? Well, because of the output and the lack of training, they only do what is necessary in order to survive, not what else could be done. And this is just an analogy between understanding nature and how it relates to us, but what else could be done so that they could do more, right? So you see cross country runners, they will run for an excess period of time, distance, endurance, so on and so forth. However, most cross country runners are not power lifters or bodybuilders or into strength training. So yes, they may lack in one area, but they have significant gains in another due to their cardiovascular health, right? But if you noticed, or if you ever seen a duathlon or triathlon or whatever the case may be, you'll notice that they'll have like these glucose gummies or sugar gummies, so on and so forth, so that they can have energy during the process. And they'll either have a bottle of water, or there'll be like checkpoints where you could grab a bottle of water, drink it with electrolytes, so on and so forth, so you could keep going. They call them electrolytes, but it's really minerals such as like potassium, sodium, and things like that. Now, why is it needed? Well, if you drink just water, it'll flush out your system. And eventually, your body won't be able to retain the water, so you have sodium, which helps your body retain water and releases it slowly. You have potassium in there to prevent cramping. You have a combination of the two so that you definitely don't cramp. And I've been there before. I flushed my body out before, and I've experienced extreme cramping, so on and so forth, because I didn't have things like potassium, sodium, magnesium, and all these other, vitamins and minerals that you're supposed to have in your body when conducting extreme exercise, or you're getting ready for, let's say, like a Spartan race or a Tough Mudder, whatever the case may be. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning science is because, remember, the next lesson we're going to be going into science, moving away from art, and things will be getting more complex because I'll also be contributing the factors of creativity, logic, and art into science to show you how they come together. So, continuing with science, science uses art to create tools so they can work. So there's a gentleman by the name of Chris Do. And Chris Do is, if I remember, he won several awards, but if I remember correctly, he did some of the artwork for the game Halo. If you remember Master Chief, so on and so forth, etc. He did some of the work there. Now, I remember him telling a story of how he got hired by an architecture firm, and his sole purpose was to design a building, make it look extremely nice, have it give it that artistic feel where it'd be aesthetically pleasing to the eye, to anybody that looks at it. And then after he was done, he handed it to the architects, the engineers, so on and so forth, so that they can do the calculations, the mathematics, and everything else that went into the project. Same thing with science. Da Vinci would create these things, and then, because he had a background in engineering, he was also able to build. However, back then you needed more hands, right? So therefore, he would design things and then put the schematics, i.e., the image or the art, there with the mathematics already complete, showing people, like an IKEA project, how to build the thing, right? Similar to, other stories that you may have heard, right? So this is how science will technically use art in order to build tools, to build other things, right? Because it's like stepping stones. First, we got to see what it looks like. What do we want it to look like? Okay, now how can we make this possible? Okay, now that we made this possible, how can we actually build this? What do we need? What are our tools, supplies, and resources, right? And the same thing goes in life, right? I want to get a job. Well, what do you need for the job? Oh, well, if you want to go into the trades, you want to be, let's say, a welder, you have to go to welding school, become an apprentice, or whatever the case may be. Then you earn your, you do your time, and then you earn the right to call yourself as such. You want to go into law. Okay, well, you have to get your bachelor's. You have to go to law school. You have to understand terminology. You have to understand jargon. You have to understand what copy is within the marketing realm, just in case you go into corporate or business law, because sometimes they will use terminology that the attorney or lawyers don't understand. So they have to actually go and do their due diligence when they're researching everything, because it may sound like one thing, but it really is another. And the law, if you ever seen the show Suits, there's a part in there where they're having a competition, and Lewis is actually hosting this thing, and he's asking all the Harvard students in there, different questions, and he talks about presidents that went to Harvard, so on and so forth. And there is this one gentleman that goes off and he lists the presidents that went to Harvard, and Mike Ross steps in. He goes, "You're incorrect." And Lewis goes, "No, you got this one, this one, this one, and this one." He goes, "And you forgot this one." He goes, "But he didn't go to Harvard." He goes, "Yes, he did. He went to another school first." And by all means, you can do this in your own life. He went to another school first and then attended Harvard briefly before graduating with his law degree. And you stated, Lewis, that the law is a precise endeavor, which means that that gentleman was incorrect. Am I right or wrong? And he goes, "You're right. You win," so on and so forth. And, it's very true, because the law is very black and white, like a game of chess, right? It's very black and white. This piece moves like this, that piece moves like this, so on and so forth. Whereas, like, if you were doing, let's say, a magic trick, there's so much more to it, like marketing, that people don't understand, which makes it effective, because not only are you utilizing tools, resources, and supplies, you're engaging with other people, and you're able to connect with them on a deeper level, whether that's through your showmanship, your performance, or the storytelling that you have the ability to do so while you're performing, right? In chess, you can do something similar to this. If you've seen the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer, the gentleman that plays Morpheus, that was in the movie, does this thing where he starts talking to the other player. Now, some people cannot do two things at once, i.e., play chess, plan out, so on and so forth, carry out a strategy while having a conversation about something else, which makes the game more difficult, right? This is similar to magic or marketing or whatever the case. In law, not everybody gets to talk. Everybody gets one chance to talk, and then the other person talks, and then it goes back and forth like a tennis match. Your turn, then my turn, then your turn, or a ping pong table, right? Your turn, then my turn. Whereas if you're in magic, you're doing a lot of things at once, similar to marketing, right? You have copywriting, you have the website, you have social media, you have analytics, you have what else? So many other things, integrated marketing, you have tag manager, so on and so forth, right? To understand the data, then you have to analyze the data, then you have to convert the creative to match the data so that you can speak to the people more effectively, not just with the creative assets, but with the copy assets as well. How do we get their attention? And then how do we make sure that this is a streamlined process and there's no disconnect? You don't want a brochure that shows a blue ocean beach, so on and so forth, and then you get there and the water looks like it has trash in it and it's green and algae and all this other stuff, because not only is that false advertising, but it's a disconnect, which is what we like to call it, right? There's a disconnect within the movement through the funnel process when you're developing clients, customers, users, whatever the case may be. Same thing in life. You can't just walk into the courtroom, so on and so forth, and just start talking. There is a procedure. There are steps. There's jury selection. If there's not jury selection, there's evidence gathering. And then, of course, there's research that has to be done on the evidence to make sure that it's factual, that hasn't been tampered with. So there's forensics now, so on and so forth, etc. So there's a lot that goes into it, right? So think about that. Science uses art to create tools so that they can work, right? Like a CAD machine for an engineer. Now, science also teaches that bears can survive in winter after consuming, which turns into supplies later. I mentioned this earlier, right? The hibernation period. So if you've ever seen somebody that, so on and so forth, looks like a bear, we'll say that, right? 9 times out of 10, they are more than likely able to fast for a longer period than the cross-country runner. Why? Because their resources and supplies are already with them. They just have to move their body, and then their body will search for those supplies or those resources externally or internally within the body, right? This is the same thing when bears hibernate. The body will search for those supplies within the body of the bear, keeping it alive throughout the duration of its hibernation period within winter. So let's continue. In business, there is a combination of art and science. This is why when you graduate college, you get a degree in the arts or the sciences aspects, right? So when you're going through this, you have to understand, okay, you're going to start a business. Well, it's both art and science. Why is it both art and science? Maybe you work for Tesla, or maybe you own Tesla, or you're competing with Tesla, right? There's a lot of science and engineering that goes into it, but you also want the car to look good. So you hire artists to design the car, and then you bring that to the engineers so that they could build it to specifications to match what the artwork looks like. Right? Same thing with creative writing, same thing with speaking on stage, same thing with showmanship and performance, right? However, most people are inherently lazy. And the reason is because your body's trying to conserve energy. The more energy you conserve, the more, things you can do, so on and so forth, right? This is why watching TV and Netflix is so gratifying, because you don't have to work very hard or burn many calories in order to understand what is going on. It kind of just tells you, right? And then, of course, if you go to the gym, you have to exert energy. If you go for a walk, you have to exert energy, right? All these things come together within business, right? You have the sales team, right? Well, the sales team needs energy, i.e. money, in order to go ahead and pitch and sell to clients, right? They normally have a slush fund. They're able to have the company credit card. They're able to wine and dine guests, so on and so forth, take them out to dinners, lunches, so on and so forth, to get in their good graces to build what's known as rapport with the person that they're trying to do business with. Then there's marketing, right? The art aspect of it, right? How do you plant the seed? Because if you're just sending salespeople out there, you're going in cold. And if you don't plant the seed of curiosity, not doubt, but curiosity, then you're going to have a more difficult time during the sales process. If you're a great marketer, you have very little sales team, because the effort in which it takes to sell the individuals on what it is that you're trying to sell them on, think Apple or Android, doesn't take very much. I mean, think about it. Sony Ericsson, or Sony, I should say, came out with their own phone that competes with both products, right? Android and iOS, right? And Apple, right? They operate, I think, on the Android platform or system. However, their phone design has to compete with Motorola, Nokia, so on and so forth, etc. And then, of course, Androids are so saturated, that's why the phones are so cheap, etc. Whereas Apple decided to market correctly, restricting the design itself, maybe not the size of the phone, but the design itself, so that they can capitalize and profit based upon, well, art, and then combining that with science. Let's make it faster, because if we save and conserve energy on the artwork, i.e., stop spending so much money here, we can develop the product so that it becomes better on the opposite side. How many people have had an Android where it bugs out or freaks out, or it's too slow and it doesn't compete as well, or the camera quality sucks, etc., because they're trying to put so much output and differentiality, or give so much variation and variety to people, that they forgot about the software. Because essentially people will look at a phone as, well, I pick up the phone, I send text messages, I call, occasionally I take pictures. But now, as time is moving forward, with apps, applications, people wanting to take more pictures and videos, so on and so forth, they're going to have to put more emphasis on it. So that's what Google did with the Pixel, so that it could compete. They, increase the camera quality, they increase the speed of the phone, how much RAM it comes with, etc. Right? So you have to think about this if you're not only in life, but in business or anywhere else, right? Or any aspect, right? If you're in the military, which I have a strong background in, right? You need supplies, you need resources, you need tools, and then you put all that crap into your backpack and then you move, right? And then during the duration of the hike, or wherever the movement, wherever you're going, you're able to go into your backpack, get what you need, do what you need to do, and then keep moving forward. The goal is to always keep moving forward. However, because some people are lazy, they will not do that, right? They will stay complacent. They will be happy where they are, right? Think about this. If you had a car, right, and you never started the car, right, but it has everything in it, so on and so forth, you drove it like maybe once or twice, but for the next 3 to 6 months, you never started the car, you never turned it on, so on and so forth, what happens to the oil and the fluids that are in the car? They coagulate. The same thing happens in the body, which clogs arteries, so on and so forth, etc. Builds up cholesterol. You have high blood pressure, so on and so forth, right? Then you end up in the hospital and you're on all these medications and you're saying, I don't know why, right? When you could have looked at it like a car. Okay, let me do this every once in a while. Let me start the engine every once in a while. Let me go for a walk and rev the engine, i.e. your heart, so that you can move everything around a little bit more effectively, right? Because remember, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? And if you don't use your body effectively, well, eventually it's going to start to deteriorate, right? Then you're going to develop cancer and everything else that happens with that, right? Because you have to look at cancer as tumors that end up building weak bridges within the body to feed off the supplies that are already there, right? And these come from free radicals and everything else that happens in the body, so on and so forth. Now, I don't want to get too much into it, but you get the gist, yes? And now that we have things like ChatGPT and Google's Gemini and other AI platforms, you're able to educate yourself on these things. And remember, it's completely free, right? If you've seen my other videos, right, such as debunking undercover billionaires, so on and so forth, I took a cheap $50 phone that I got from Walmart that has similar capabilities to an iPhone, not as great, but similar capabilities. I can download the ChatGPT app. I can download the Google Assistant app, or whatever the case. I can then ask it questions and better myself so that I can survive and move longer, right? How do I get money? I.e., another form of energy, right? You go to work, they pay you a salary in exchange for your time, in exchange for your energy, in exchange for your effort. You get a certain value, and that value is depicted by whatever they decide to pay you, whether it's hourly or salary, right? Let's move forward. So how can artists also be scientists? Well, remember the Great Renaissance, right? You had Michelangelo, you had Donatello, you had Da Vinci, so on and so forth, Raphael, not the Ninja Turtles, but you get the idea, right? Now, Leonardo was the only one, if I remember correctly, that was both an engineer and an artist. Remember, he could not make money as an engineer, although he was great at it, because the only thing they wanted to pay him for was the art that he was producing. So he decided to make art in order to go ahead and, feed himself, right? But when the Medicis and everything else happened in Venice and, Italy, and the war broke out, etc., they quickly went to Da Vinci and they said, hey, we need something that's going to, defend us against these large armies, right? And so he created mass weapons of destruction that effectively, well, you seen how big Italy is? You ever ask yourself how small countries in Europe defended themselves against such large countries like Germany, Russia, etc.? I mean, take Japan for instance. How big is China in comparison to Japan? But China never took over Japan. Why is that? Maybe because of technology, maybe because of the engineering, maybe because of everything else and the out of the box thinking that was not as logical at the time, so on and so forth, right? Most people will think logically because it's easy, right? It's very hard to be creative. So if science, if art and science can come together, it can create the illusion of magic, right? Now, there was the expression or the quote that was said by Thor in the Avengers that anything that has not been identified or shown to people and described by science is indistinguishable from magic. Why is that? Well, because like secrets work in the world, right? Because you don't know how it operates, maybe it's physics or whatever the case may be. Because you don't know how it operates, you're not able to understand it. So therefore, it creates the illusion of magic, right? And this happens in mentalism all the time. And it's very hard for people to understand mentalism because it's a psychological form of magic. If a doctor comes out and tells you you have mental health issues because of social engineering, you're not going to question the doctor. You're just going to take the pills like a good little boy or girl, shut your mouth, and take the pills until they tell you to stop and they say you don't have the itis no more or whatever freaking disease they say that you have, right? You don't do your research. You don't go onto Google. You don't ask ChatGPT or Google Gemini, so on and so forth. You don't question the side effects of the medication, so on and so forth. I mean, look at what's happening in the news now with the COVID vaccinations. Excuse me, don't penalize me. But, now they're finding out that there's side effects and that it was a part of gene therapy and all this other stuff. Who would have thought that Anthony Fauci, a doctor, could have gotten paid to say whatever he wanted to say to put more shekels in his pocket, screw you over, so on and so forth? Because remember, the vaccine was free. And if anything's free, you're the product, right? Or you're the guinea pig, or you're the test dummy to see if anything works, right? So remember that. All these social platforms, yes, are free, but what are they doing with the data that they collect from you, right? Who are they selling it to, right? Because remember, information is the most valuable form of currency. Moving forward, when people / different creatures or living things come together as class, right? Creativity, logic, art, science, and spirituality. It can be, as once said, indistinguishable from magic, right? Well, if I combine creativity with logic, add a little bit of art in there, throw some science, I can create something that looks like magic. Some people would call this the spiritual world or whatever the case may be. In the New Age culture, they have many different, ways of communicating this. However, if you were to combine those four things, creativity, it's different and unique. Logic, it makes sense when people see it. Art, the showmanship, the story that goes behind it, the branding that occurs. Most people don't know why they bought Nikes or prefer Nikes or the iPhone or the Android, so on and so forth. But they did it for a particular reason, psychologically, right? And then, of course, you have the science that goes into it, right? Which is also psychology and medicine, right? Or the studies of medicine, right? Now, when you combine all those things, you realize and you tell yourself you justify your actions, because you have to remember, and we get taught this in marketing, people normally make decisions based on emotion first, then justify with logic later, right? How many of you have a girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever the case may be? It's like, why did you spend all that money on that purse? Oh, well, because this, that, and the third, and blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden they come to you and say, oh, I got no money. You had money for the purse. You had money for the Jordans, etc. Where's the money for everything else, right? Common sense got tricked. It's a false fallacy. In psychology, this is a cognitive bias, right? And marketers are trained on this, right? Salespeople are loosely trained on this. Some people in the psychological field, such as psychiatrists, doctors, psychologists, etc., are very well trained on this. They have to understand these facets when they're trying to explain something, not only for them, but to understand you. And then, of course, you don't know what they're saying, or sometimes they don't know what they're saying, and so they're just going to see what works, right? There's a technique called stacking that they do. So they play scientists. Oh, try this. Okay, well, if this is happening, put this with that. And then if this happens because of this and that, try this. And now you next thing you know, you're on 12 medications. It happened to my grandmother, right? They were playing scientists. They didn't know what they were doing, right? They thought they did. Remember, the college degree makes you confident, the experience makes you proficient, and the success brings about your reputation and your brand. However, if you don't have much success, if you think a college degree makes you intelligent, right? Then, as I said before, you must also think a driver's license means everybody could drive on the street. How many accidents do you see going home on a weekly basis, right? Can they drive? They should have been able to drive, right? But they're gambling with other people's lives when they get into a car accident. Are they a doctor? Well, they should be a doctor. They have the degree, but they're gambling with people's lives when they start stacking medications or testing stuff or whatever the case may be. And then, of course, nobody asks questions because of social engineering, right? Because of the confidence is there. You have a doctorate degree. You spent this much time studying books. I could go to the library and do the same thing. That doesn't mean, so on and so forth. Why? Because you dropped 100K, 400K, whatever it costs to become a professional, that makes you great at what you do? No, it doesn't. It's only through trial and error, and then making sure that they learn from the trial and error, that they continue to succeed. But the only way they're going to succeed is from learning from others that have already accomplished the task. And sometimes people are too prideful, so they base their decisions on emotion. I don't like this person. I don't like what he's saying. I don't like his tone. I don't like his pitch. I don't like the way you said it. It's not the way you said it, it's how you said it. Shut the fuck up and try to understand something. Okay? Because I'm trying to help not only you guys, but in essence, trying to help other people when you go out into the world and educate them on the things that I'm educating you on. Right? So think about this from a philosophical standpoint, right? Aesop's fable. You have the wind, right? Consider the wind like the media now, right? Or the air. Remember they used to say we're on the air, so on and so forth. So the wind, right? Now, when the air challenged the sun, right? It said, I bet I can make that man take off his jacket or take off his shirt, so on and so forth. And this is Aesop's fable. It's also in the movie Michael with John Travolta, so on and so forth, and he discusses this as well. And so the wind continues to blow, trying to force things to happen, right? And it's the same thing as the media. We're going to keep repeating this, like in marketing. We keep repeating this. Or you go into a department store. Hey, sir, do you need help? Oh, hey, ma'am, do you need... No, I'm good, thank you. No, I'm good, thank you. No, I'm good, thank you, right? But then what happened afterwards? The sun came out and it became warm. And you wanted to take off your shirt or jacket. You wanted to jump in the pool into the deep end and play with the cool kids because you wanted to do that, right? Because there's different ways to go about things in life, right? But the first thing you have to do is understand what motivates, drives people to take action. And because the body and the brain are lazy, because it's been designed over 2,000 years to conserve energy, right? You develop patterns. And if you don't disrupt those patterns, you stay stuck wherever you are. My mother used to say this, and I think someone said she was a clinical psychologist, but her degree says she has a bachelor's. It's written in Latin, whatever. She went to Fordham University. And so she would say people are where they want to be. And I would say that's not necessarily true, right? Then she would also say things like, oh, I'm a realist, so on and so forth, etc. I said, that's not necessarily true. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, your reality dictates something for you, just like perception and perspective dictates something for someone else, right? And so I said, do you think Oprah Winfrey or Bill Gates' reality is the same as yours? She goes, no, well, they have a lot of money and she started with all these things, right? Oh, well, they have money, they have this, they have a privileged family, this, that, and the third, etc. And you can't do that? Well, you don't understand, blah, 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 whatever. Right? And then, of course, people are where they want to be. Are they really, though? Or were they put there by accident? Were they forced in a position because maybe they knew something or did something and somebody was trying to either teach them a lesson or punish them or whatever the case, so that they can learn and understand what to do and what not to do so that they could keep moving forward and not backwards or cutting their life short, right? So I would challenge her with all these things. And granted, I love philosophy, right? I'm contemplating getting my degree in that, but then again, I also enjoy law, so we'll see, right? But as I teach you guys, this is a whole philosophical class that combines a lot of things, right? We talk about art, we talk about science, we talk about what's going on in the news and the media that's spoken through the air, so on and so forth, right? And then, of course, we talk about other things. We talk about spirituality. We talk about emotion. We talk about creativity. What sparks it? What drives people? One second. What drives people or sparks that curiosity again? Remember in the last video that I did, I talked about walking through life with the mind of a child, right? Why did I quote that? Well, if you look at children, they're like mini scientists, right? They're very curious, they want to see what works, they like to play, etc. And if you look at things like that, you'll enjoy the process. But if you look at things like going to the gym and feeling sore the next day and you don't want to feel that pain again, so you stop going, or like the story or the little snippet I gave you about my sister where she says, we're running and we're only doing 1.5 miles. And she goes, no, you guys keep going, I'll catch up. That's not how this works, especially if you're working with a team or you're working with, somebody that's trying to pull you up, right? What did Obama say when he was president? Pick up your fucking pants, right? Why? Well, my uncle was a correctional officer, and I could tell you one of the reasons is, well, if you're in prison and you're sagging, that's an indication that you're willing to take it somewhere, right? You don't mind bending over or being a bend over buddy for somebody, right? Oh, show the love. Hello, ladies. All right? Now, that's not to critique anybody, so on and so forth, because I really don't care about your sexual preferences, but it's a subtle indication of what that means. And then, of course, if you're getting chased, you have one hand on your crotch trying to hold everything up while you're trying to get away. That's not effective. You end up tripping over yourself or slowing yourself down because your gait, the distance between your front leg and your back leg, gets cut short because the belt restricts your leg movement. Let's think about this logically. Pick up your pants, you might run faster. Moving forward. So is art and science magic, or is art one form and science another? So art can be magical, yes? Because why? Have you ever seen a Broadway play, a theatrical artistic performance that moves you, that brings you to tears, so on and so forth? That is one form of what I would like to call magic, right? So on and so forth. But then you have science, right? The technology, CRISPR technology, DNA modification that can cure things like cancer, HIV, AIDS, so on and so forth, heart disease, etc. That's another form of magic, right? However, if you don't go out and discover and ask these questions, right, and you always get emotional, remember, you cannot fight with a dull weapon. Remember that lesson, right? Learn to stand there, take it, and understand the situation that's going on before you make the emotional decision and then try to justify your bullshit behavior or purchase with logic later. Oh, I did this because of that. Oh, well, he said this, so I did this. And then I couldn't take it no more, so I did this. Stop. Listen. Learn. Understand. Keep calm. And carry on. All areas use resources, supplies, and tools just in a different way, right? Whether you're a mechanic, now a mechanic can be an entendre, because remember I mentioned magic. Now in magic, mechanics do something else. In automotive world, mechanics do something else. They work on cars. In magic, at a poker table, they're very skilled with a deck of playing cards. And it's the same term, just used differently, right? So if someone's a mechanic, depending on the environment, if you don't know what the hell you're dealing with, then you're not going to know what's being said, and you get lost in translation, and then you make your emotional decisions, which normally weigh more, so on and so forth, and then you carry out actions, right? Etc. Or maybe let's say you're in love with somebody and now that person is taking advantage of you because they know you love them. But as I said earlier, right, when I told you my mother said, the person that has the power in the relationship loves less or loves the least, right? Because now if I know you love me, you're head over heels for me, so on and so forth, they could get you to do whatever they want. Can you cook for me? Can you clean for me? Can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? Etc. Then when they leave your ass high and dry, you're all brokenhearted and you start going down this spiral, right? And then you would justify the logic or you try to make sense of everything, right? Because it's an emotional thing, right? And then the logic tells you, oh, well, this happened because of that. She left me because of this. He left me because of this, so on and so forth, etc. Instead of understanding what was going on. That's why, if you come in at 100% and the only other person is giving 50%, well, you're going to exacerbate yourself. You're going to be exhausted. You're going to feel as though there's something that's wrong, right? And then, of course, it eventually tries to level out, but it's never going to be level because givers will keep giving and takers will keep taking. Find the balance. If you're working with a car, so on and so forth, right, you have fuel, etc. It uses resources in a different way, right? Yes, gas comes from oil, but oil cannot go into your gas tank, right? Think about it. You put oil into your gas tank, 9 times out of 10, your car is not going to work efficiently unless you structure it to do so, right? There was a gentleman that created a car that ran off of French fry grease, right? But he built and designed the engine to work and operate as such. Every fluid in your car, even your radiator, has a purpose for a specific reason. But if you try to use the same thing for everything, then you'll get nothing from everything. So I have 3 more points to tap onto here. So let's talk about speech. Speech is also different, but used in different ways and order. Some use it to create chaos and others order. And some use it for balance, at least to create it, right? You can say, keep it simple, stupid, right? Or you can say, keep it stupid, simple. Or you can say, keep it simply simple. One is balanced, one creates chaos, the other one has a structured order so you don't take it personally, right? So remember that the order in which things are said also matter, just like the order in which dominoes would fall if you lay them out correctly, or the way cards are played in a spades game, or the way cards are played in a poker game, right? You have the flop, then you have the street, you have the river, so on and so forth, right? And then of course your odds change every single time, right? Because of the way the things or the way the order or the structure came out, right? Same thing in life, right? You may be a lot younger and you excel through life. You had a jump start. Maybe your parents helped you out. Maybe some rich uncle helped you or rich aunt or whatever the case may be. Maybe you're extremely smart and you got scholarships and grants and all this and you applied yourself, whatever the case may be. So you make more money than the average person at 25, right? Or maybe you're starting over again and you're, let's say, in your 40s or 50s or 60s. And you want to talk about buying a business or trying to move up in the world, so on and so forth. How do you retool yourself with education, knowledge, using the products that are already out there, the services that are already out there? Well, like I said, there's ChatGPT and Gemini. Tell it to become an instructor. Tell it to provide you a lesson plan. Tell it to give you free resources. Now you don't have to spend so much money on education to level up in the world, right? You have the tools. You may need to pay for the certification because people always got to make sure, like a proctored exam, that you're not fucking cheating or you don't have an earpiece in your ear or whatever the case is, that, oh, well, someone's saying this to him or someone's saying that to him. So how is he getting this information? How is she doing this, etc. Right? Let's get multiple eyes on them. So you might have to pay for their services so that when you pass the exam, similar to law, similar to, SATs, or the med board, whatever the case may be, they can say, yes, this person officially said this. This person did this without any help. This person did this without, and I remember showing you guys this last time, having a long script out. Remember, these are all bullet points. So where does this information come from? It may have came from them. It may have been their memory actually working. It may have been the 1% kicking in, so on and so forth. Or the collective consciousness that helps out every once in a while. Whatever you need to tell yourself, right? But remember that. Now, to the last 2 points. Use this wisely, for this ability can be misused. Remember, the things that I've taught you throughout class, right? It's like teaching somebody martial arts. You can be the asshole that goes out and wants to fight everybody and teach everybody a lesson, so on and so forth. Or you could be a gentle giant, right? You could be the gentleman or female or the lady that steps in for the little person when they can't defend themselves, and you level the playing field. You could be the Matt Damon in the movie Good Will Hunting that stands up for Ben Affleck when the asshole or the dick with the blonde hair that thinks they know everything, so on and so forth, starts quoting stuff, and then he comes up with originality, right? That's how you become stronger. That's how you build a strong unit. You're only strong as your weakest link, but if that weak link does not see you as loyal, strong, willing to defend them when they cannot defend themselves, then they're not going to follow you. They're not going to stay with you. They will sell you out for almost $1. Think about it. Depending on what country you're in, because if you're in Mexico, $1 is like 22 pesos over there. So the currency conversion is freaking crazy. 50 Cent said something and he's like, oh, well, 50, what if somebody said something to me, he's like, oh, well, what if I did this and I get my boys to do this? He goes, nah, this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the same $50,000 that you wanted to keep or rob from me, and I'm going to give it to your boys. Now everybody can eat, and I'm going to tell them to do you up quick time and double time. Yeah. I mean, think about it. If Trump declared martial law, we don't get paid very much, so on and so forth, right? We don't get, I think every 2 weeks I got paid, what, $721, and then I made, what, $900 every 2 weeks. But guess what? What if we gave the salary that, everybody else has to them, and they came in? Yeah, that would fix things real quick. People would fix their step real fast and stop getting so fucking curious, all right? Because they'll get shocked to find out that they're not alone, right? Look at the movie, what is it? Union, that's on Netflix, right? Halle Berry's in there and she's like, oh, they're really scared when they find out who we are. We do most of the work, this, that, and the third. And, I was contemplating that. And I said, that's very interesting because, 9/11 happened. And these people were living in caves and deserts, so on and so forth. But America has all this technology, etc., blah, 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 blah. Well, how did that happen? If they're that good, someone either let it happen or they were very skilled and diligent in what they were proceeding and carrying out to do, right? And that became an issue. And then if you do your research, you realize that the different law enforcement agencies and everything else weren't communicating because they didn't get along with each other. Oh, I can't tell you this because you have rats. I can't tell you this because you'll sell me out. I can't tell you this because you're crooked. I can't tell you this because you like running your fucking mouth. Whatever the case may be. Excuse my language. I curse like a sailor, but I'm a Marine. So think about that, right? So everything in this lesson and lessons prior to can be used for good, but it could also be used for bad. Remember, if you watch another video I posted, I talked about showing my friend 3-card money. And he ended up using 3-card money to con people out of money, right? Or if you remember when I talked about the people at the bar, the junior grifters or whatever that were trying to play baseball, right? So on and so forth. I caught on to what they were doing extremely quickly. It's fine. Just like students, just like kids, they'll eventually learn. And everybody gets theirs. Remember that. Nobody normally thinks long, they think short term. So if I give you $100 today, you won't think about the $1 million in a year. So, last point. For art is the creative expression of science, as science is the logical explanation of art. I'm going to say that once again. For art is the creative expression of science, as science is the logical explanation of art. Remember that. Why is that? Well, because sometimes People need science to say this. They need mathematics to explain things logically because not everybody can interpret everything the same way. And then, of course, you see science, but then what good is science if it doesn't look good? If it doesn't give you a feeling on the inside? When you drive that new car, when you go to the museum, or you go, so on and so forth. You bring your kids to the park, etc. Right? You buy the new house, you get the new apartment, etc. Right? So take that with you. This is the end of art and the last lesson. Moving forward, we're going to be getting into science, and I am extremely excited for this one because we're going to be talking about not just science, but, well, physics and everything else, the cosmos and everything else, and how those things, work together, as well as bringing together now creativity, logic, and art within the lessons taught in science. So until next time, my friends, take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.